Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Jason Lehman. I'm the marketing team lead here at Fishbowl Solutions, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today as we cover part 2 of our webinar series titled How WebCenter Workflows Help You Stay Productive While Working from Home. Happy to be joined by my colleague Brent Genero, who's one of our subject matter experts when it comes to workflow at Fishbowl Solutions, and Brent will be joining me a little bit later on and giving you a demo. Also, this webinar is in a series, so we are doing these monthly. We're offering WebCenter tips and tricks every month. We kicked this off back in March with a comparison of the various loading tools that are available within WebCenter, comparing it to one of the solutions we built. So we have a landing page off our homepage on our website where you can link to and go watch some of those past recordings. So with that, here's our agenda. I'll give a quick Fishbowl overview. I'm also going to summarize a little bit about what we covered last week in part 1 of this webinar series, where my colleague Tom Johnson showed you how to set up an ad hoc workflow in about 8 minutes, and really just kind of walking you through the various steps that he did just as a refresher. We'll then move on and I'll turn it over to Brent and he'll give you a demo of Fishbowl's workflow solution set, really showing you how to extend some of those out-of-the-box workflow capabilities when it comes to additional notifications, escalations, providing very clear instructions, and also workflow search. We'll summarize the webinars at the end, and we will take questions. So again, quick overview of Fishbowl. Hopefully by now most of you know who we are and what we do. If not, I just want to mention again that we've been focusing on content management, specifically with WebCenter, since 1999. But really our goal is to help customers solve their costly and frustrating knowledge sharing problems. We've obviously used WebCenter to do this over the years. From a content management perspective, really helping you manage, retain, and distribute content through enhanced desktop and mobile experiences. We've also diversified, if you will, and understand that a lot of organizations are moving content to the cloud. So we also leverage Oracle's Content Experience Cloud, focusing on developing omni-channel experiences for the digital content. Most recently, we've developed mobile applications and we've created chatbots and digital assistants for customer and employee service and sales enablement using Oracle's Mobile Cloud Hub. And to help you find all that high-value content within your organization, we provide enterprise search software and services for both on-premise and cloud-based use cases, leveraging Mindbreeze and Google Cloud. So last week, to summarize what we covered in the webinar in terms of the business problems that we've seen in this very unique time that we're all experiencing. A lot of us are working home now. So the big problem that I introduced and that really talked about, the theme was really about communication and the communication gaps that we're all experiencing, where we're not able to see our coworkers in person and have in-person meetings and whiteboard stuff out and really collaborate in person. So email becomes relied on more and more. Yet email is not a good tool for content-centric business processes, and it shouldn't be part of an organization's content governance model. Because if you're using email to send attachments of content that have to be reviewed and approved by others, I think we can all expect that those processes are going to become bottlenecked. People opening the wrong versions, not tracking changes, sending those back. So from creation to release of content, you can expect a lot of delays. Furthermore, it's hard to track down, I guess, who has the proverbial ball, so to speak, when using email to review and approve content. So if something gets released that is inaccurate, it's hard to really view that audit trail of the people that reviewed the content and when and what they did while they were reviewing. So just summarized in terms of what's possible and the value that workflow provides is that the communication is consistent and timely. If you're part of a workflow, you'll get a system-generated notice that it's now your turn to take action, take that next step, for a content item that's in workflow, and really understanding your role. And then by defining what your workflow outcomes are, so when you have a piece of content and you need it to go through a system, and have it approved and reviewed by the specific people. really taking a look at how much time that should take, workflow really helps you hit those outcomes. Also in this unique time, I think it's an opportunity for people within an organization to be, or more people within an organization be part of a workflow process. So as you do that, you can see that you might have higher engagement across the organization and within departments where people can really feel like they're part of a process now for content that needs to get reviewed and published or cycled through your system and distributed, and the value that they can provide in that review process, as well as just making sure that the notifications are going out. So when new content gets released, especially like training documents for the example that we showed last week on how to connect with VPN and some training, you can really make sure that that information is getting to those people. And then you can remove some of those bottlenecks. So, email is a great tool for communication, not great for content-centric business processes. So you can really, by using workflow, decrease the amount of bottlenecks and inconsistencies you're seeing from a content review process. And then really around accountability. So each step in the process, who's involved or groups are involved, so that you can always track down at what point did something go awry and effectively audit all the way back to creation. Again, we wanted to mention that there's a lot of different workflow tools out there. Oracle has a few of them. They have the BPM suite, which is really that enterprise grade workflow system, more popular with invoice and accounts payable applications. We're really focusing on the content-based workflows within WebCenter. So as Tom showed you last week, within about 8 minutes, he was able to set up an ad hoc workflow to get a workflow item through the system and the steps involved to do that. And what he showed you was these are really based on criteria. So leveraging metadata within WebCenter to determine workflow items. And then he went on to show you how you can include reviewers in that process through tokens. So there's a couple different ways in WebCenter to name the reviewers of a workflow item. Tom specifically focused on the tokens feature, which is basically using metadata to set up your reviewers. And so to summarize, and again, I'd encourage everyone to go check out what Tom showed last week. He went in and set up this ad hoc workflow, and he created tokens for the metadata fields. By doing that, I guess what's needed is a little bit of IDOC script language programming ability. So he added that script, and then he assigned his variables, which were the users or the aliases that would be part of the workflow process. And then he named the criteria workflow. I think we called it training. There was a profile set up so that when a new training document for the VPN system or process got checked in, it triggered the workflow. And then he set up the steps and users. So who was assigned to review and edit and what they could do at that step, who could approve or reject, and then the general notification out to the various users. So for today, before I kick it over to Brent, what he's going to show you is how the inherent WebCenter workflow capabilities can be enhanced and extended through reminders, escalations, different instructions or customizable instructions, and the ability to search for workflow. All these capabilities are enabled by Fishbowl's workflow solution set. So Brent's going to show you how to set that up and configure the tool to do just that. So how to remind users and escalate items, add those explicit instructions as the scenario that he's going to be discussing is, workflow is going to a person that's become unavailable. For whatever reason, they're not taking their step or action on the workflow. And so how do you get around that? How do you basically escalate that, or first remind them, then escalate that to the next person to keep that workflow moving? And then how to create and enable users to add additional comments on approval steps for that full audit trail. So for example, in that case, why those additional comments are being added to let people know that, for example, a manager had to step in and approve that item because the person that was supposed to take that step is unavailable. And then really, if that happens, there might be times where that person is responsible for multiple workflow items and that's in their step and they're not taking action. So it'd be good for others in the organization to go through WebCenter to find the workflows that person had using the search functionality. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brent.
All right, so the first issue that we run into with workflows is that when you have several users that the document needs to go through before it can finally be released. And each of those users are distracted and busy with a million other things. It can end up dragging on, and next thing you know, it's 2 weeks later and we're still trying to get this item released. And especially now when users are at home, they're distracted by homeschooled kids, and you can't just walk by their desk and remind them to take a look. So what the solution is to utilize workflow timeout helper. So that is one of the workflow solution set components that will allow a timer to be configured so that the user is reminded of that they're assigned to this content item. So they can get this reminder, periodically until they take an action on it. So right now, I'm gonna come over here to our workflow admin applet, and the workflow I'm gonna show you is this training ad hoc workflow. And so this should be basically what Tom showed you last week, where it's step 1 and a step 2 of a workflow, and then a notification step. And so step 1 and step 2 are based on tokens that you will get to select the user. Really what I'm going to do is show you a simple option here. So with the workflow timeout helper, it's once the component is enabled, you really just need to come in and add this include the standard timeout script to the entry and the update events. In addition, if you want a more specific time limit than what the component has as the default, you can set that right here. So typically you would set this to be 24 hours if you wanted the user to get a reminder every day, which can be very nice because you get in the morning and you log in and you see this email and you realize, oh, I need to take action. I forgot about that. But for the purposes of this demo, I have it set to 10 seconds. So what I'm going to do is just come over here and I'm going to show a check-in of a training document. And we're going to go with the VPN training manual that Tom was showing last week. And so for step 1, it's going to go to this department manager. And for step 2, I'm going to have it go to this training admin, 2 users I just created. So I'm going to go ahead and check that in. So now that this is checked in, it's going to be in the workflow queue. And if I go to my email, I will eventually get a notification. And you can see the notification that's the initial notification. But now, being that I have it as a 2-second or 10-second timeout, in a little bit, it will notify me again because it's been longer than 10 seconds. I'm actually going to trigger that with just a metadata update, and that actually kind of kicks things off. And so in a little bit here, I should see a second notification. And so here we can see that I immediately got my second notification to remind me. So in addition to the reminders, it can actually be a little more helpful if somebody does not get to the item after so many reminders. It might be that they're out of the office, they're unavailable for who knows what reason. And in that case, we can do more of an escalation setup. And so I'm going to show how we can do that with a small snippet of code. So if I come back into our step 1, go to our update step, I'm going to paste in this snippet of code. And so what this is doing is getting a variable called the timeout count that the workflow timeout helper sets every time the user is notified. And so in this case, after the first timeout, we're going to jump ahead 1 step. So in this case, we're just going to jump ahead to the step 2 user. So if I wait for the next reminder, that should be coming through. In addition to reminding, we should actually see now that because we didn't take action, this item moved to step 2. And now it is assigned to the training admin for step 2. So now in this example, the escalation just went ahead, and this is a simple example that just requires, a change to the update event. But it is possible to make an add-on component that will allow you to override the default escalation behavior or timeout behavior, and it can give you a few more options. So you could do something a little more complex, like you could give the user a few more warnings before it gets escalated. You could actually list the number of days overdue. Sometimes users don't understand, or they lost track of when it was assigned to them. And when they get a reminder that says, hey, this is 3 days overdue, they might realize, oh, I thought that was just yesterday. And then they take action and get around to it. So that can be helpful. And it can also be helpful to just notify the manager, and the manager can take a look and see why they haven't got around to it. And in addition, you could also do some more complex routing to specific backup users, depending on the organization, who should be taking the backup role if somebody is out. Might require some higher logic to check their department or something like that. So there's definitely a lot of options here that can instantly reroute the item to the next available person and keep that item rolling and hopefully released in a timely manner. So the next issue that we can often run into with workflows is that some people are just not familiar, especially if they're a backup user. They might not know the process. And so one solution that we have with the workflow solution set is to enable the custom workflow review frames. As you can see here, it allows you to come in and set up rules. And I've already set up a rule for my step 2. And so in this case, on step 2, we're going to display a custom message. And so I replied, added that message here indicating that, training administrators must review the document in 3 days, along with the link that, gives you more information. So in this case, since that item got sent to the training admin, I'm going to go ahead and log out and log in as that training admin. So if we go to my workflow assignments, we can see that it's in the queue. If we go ahead and review the item, we can now see that because this is step 2, I've got that notice that I must review this within 3 days. And if I have questions, I can look at this training approval procedure that I've linked. And that just allows everything to go a lot more smoothly when you can remind users that we have procedures that we can follow. So in this case, the training admin as the backup is going to go ahead and approve it. Now, another issue is with a lot of backup users that aren't necessarily familiar with it, we kind of lose the state of things, or we lose track of why things got approved by who. And by default, you don't normally see a comments for approvals. But the approve with comments component, which is also part of workflow solution set, does allow comments to be added for approvals. So that can be really good for auditing and just tracking, why this got approved by training admin and actually never went through this department manager user. So I'm just gonna, add this note here, so when we later come back, we can see what happened. And so in this case, we know that the department manager just was unavailable. So I'm going to go ahead and approve that. Now, at a later point, when we want to look into that, we can come over here, and if I do the quick search, go to the content info, I can then see that workflow history, which is another workflow solution set component, also will display that log of everything that happened. In this case, it was pretty simple, but in some more complex steps or complex workflows, you might run into a lot more steps that it's vital to get everybody's comments and make sure everything was approved the right way. So the last problem I want to talk about is the concept of somebody being out and just unavailable. So if this had to go to the backup, the manager might want to say, hey, well, what else are we waiting on from this user? Because we know that they're out for the next 2 weeks. So at that point, it's handy to do the workflow search. And so the workflow search is another workflow solution set component. And at that point, we could go ahead and do a search by user. So right now, I'm just going to look up T. Johnson, and I can hit search and see that, here's everything that we're waiting on for Tom. So we could go ahead and update these items and send them to different people if we wanted. It'll tell us how many days we're in the step and give us a little more information than the standard workflow lists show you. And in addition, we can also export to Excel, which is handy if you want to just create a report and give that to the appropriate personnel. So with that, I can turn it back to Jason.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. Yeah, so to summarize, as we look to wrap up today's webinar, obviously, most people that we saw register for this webinar, most of our customers, they're using workflow. The purpose of this webinar series was to really show you, again, with these very unique and interesting times, that setting up ad hoc workflows using the workflow engine in WebCenter is pretty easy and straightforward. You can get other people involved in workflows. And again, using workflow and extending that out to different content-centric business processes can really help keep those processes moving as there's been a disruption in our normal work state, if you will, with most of us working from home. The goal with today was to really show you, how to help remote workers even be more productive. So with this disruption, people out of the office, how do we make sure that people are notified? You can escalate items to the next person. And then you can provide more clear instructions for those people that are maybe newer to the workflow process or getting instructed on why that they're the next person to process the workflow with someone else being out. And then the ability to search for workflow. So as Brent showed there at the end, there might be more than one workflow that's kind of stuck, if you will. And so it's good to be able to go in and find those using a search capability. So again, wanted to show, with workflow and helping users stay more productive, really with the workflow engine provided with WebCenter, with workflow solution set, how all that can be accomplished to really help, again, remote workers stay productive during this time. All our webinars and the recordings for the webinars will be on our website. We actually have a landing page for this webinar series where you can go there and view past webinars that we've given and then what we have planned for the future. And I'd mention, as customers, please reach out to us if there's a particular topic that you're interested in, and we will, circulate that amongst the team and try to create some content around that for you. Again, our goal really is to provide useful tips and tricks in this webinar series of actual things that you can use and apply when it comes to WebCenter and content management. We're going to conclude today's webinar. We hope everyone is safe out there. I want to thank you again for attending, and we look forward to you joining our next webinar. Have a great day, everyone.